pages. So if you go directly on our YouTube page, you are able to find all of our recordings from our past masterclasses. So without wasting any more time and taking up any more of your time this morning, I just want to say good morning and thank you again for joining us for today's session. Today's session is really about your first impact dashboard from a spreadsheet to a decision-making tool. So we spoke about in the last couple of sessions around what we've got as data, what data are we collecting, where are we collecting this data, etc., etc. But now we want to just talk about how do we build more on the data that we're collecting. So how are we just taking the data from looking at it as sitting in just a spreadsheet and it helping us to actually make the decisions that are critical for our NGOs to be able to succeed and to move forward. So as usual on the call, for those of you who are new and are joining this session for the first time, we have got Philani. Philani Mdingi is from Take for Good. Philani Mdingi is the executive director of Take for Good. So we have got the very best of the cream of the crop from Take for Good running the session for us. I'll just show you their website quickly for those of you who are new, who are not maybe familiar with what they do. So this is Take for Good's website. So Take for Good. So essentially what they do is they assist people like yourself, so nonprofits, organizations throughout Africa, with assisting them with what they need in terms of tech tools. So what they actually say in their own word is, at Tech for Good, we empower NGOs and development organizations to harness the power of technology to drive their missions forward, the deep understanding of the unique challenges faced by nonprofits, especially in Africa. We provide tailored solutions that streamline operations, ensure compliance, enhance impact. Let's unlock your organization's potential with the right tech strategy. And so if you are wanting to reach out to them a bit more about other things besides what we'll be chatting about and discussing today, please feel free to reach out to Philani and his team. You'll be able to see as you scroll through, there is a bit at the bottom here where you can reach out to them and you can be able to contact them and have a session with them should you need to. But without taking up any more of Philani's time, Philani, I know you are here. I lost you in the lots of people that have joined in now, but if you can just come on camera, please, so that I can hand over to you, and then we can start the session for today.
Good morning, Zamo. Good morning, colleagues. Yes, I am on camera. Maybe just you cannot see me. I will be sharing my... Okay, great. Morning, colleagues, once again. Happy to be here as usual in our ongoing series on issues that we deem to be quite important in the NPO space. And today we are dealing with the impact dashboard. As you go on with your work from day to day, there comes a time when it's time to report to either donors, and in some instances, if you are, say, a program manager, it is time to report to your seniors. And typically, one of the key things that they want to see is to say, with the work we did, with the funds we spent, what were the outcomes? And that is where really dashboards come in to really measure the work that we do so that we can then improve on the work that we do. So what I'd like to do, colleagues, as we start, is just to do a quick check. We had shared a spreadsheet a week prior to this session, and I'd be curious to see how many of our colleagues on the call had time to at least go through the worksheet, or in some instances, hopefully, have populated some sections of the worksheet. If we just by a thumbs up, give us a sense if you had a chance to have a look or have worked on it, that would be great. I cannot see Zamo, so give me a sense of how many people roughly have had a look.
It seems like we're getting quite a few thumbs up. I also see hands up. I'm going to assume those are supposed to just be thumbs up. But yeah, there's quite a few people who have already worked on those. If you haven't, and perhaps you're not too sure where to find it, on the meeting invite itself, the documents were attached on the meeting invite. If you are struggling with those as well, please just pop in the chat for me your email address. You can just send it to me directly, and I will then email them to you. But I don't want to delay Pilani because I know that sometimes the information does take long. And so I don't want to cut into his presentation time. So if you are struggling to find those documents, just pop me directly a message and I'll be able to email those to you like I did with the guys last week that joined us in the last session.
Great, thanks, Amo. So the reason I asked colleagues is this is a very hands-on session. You'd have noted the last 2 or 3 sessions already this year have been very much hands-on session, which is part of the theme for a lot of the work we are doing now. And today I think we're tackling quite a sometimes technical in terms of execution kind of work around reporting. So it would really be great if you had a look and prepared that document, that spreadsheet that I shared. Because again, this is a build session. And part of the work we will be doing is not only just going through, the sessions in terms of practicality, but we want to be able to using your scorecards, which are the documents we sent. We need to go through those. We will be looking at KPIs, key performance indicators that we will seek to together for your specific context, work on and put together. And that particular document also has a sample data set to give a sense of if you were to use that as a dashboard, how would that look like? And also we had sent a 1-page prep guide, which was in a sense meant to give you a sense of what we will be doing today so you could prep. Hopefully nothing goes wrong in your scorecard templates for the day. But if something goes wrong and maybe you open it and you have an issue, because remember, some people are opening the spreadsheet on Excel. Some people are opening the same spreadsheet on Google Sheets, but it works for both, by the way. So there's no need to worry about that. But if anything pops up, you can just send a message to Zamor to resend you. But I don't anticipate any issues with the spreadsheets. We have a fully packed agenda. We'll try and move quite quickly with some of the sessions, kind of the context setting sessions, so that we can get into the meat of the session, which is really very much around the practicals of it all. I know the agenda looks quite aggressive and scary, but it's not as bad as it looks on this page. So I wouldn't worry so much. But this is what we have for the day. And by the end of the day, the idea is that we would like to, at least I would like to see you walk away from the session having worked on at least 3 KPIs that are specific to your organization and the work that you currently do. And also the idea then would be to test those KPIs using the spreadsheet that we had prepared prior to this session. And then down the road, you can then continue with your work and using that spreadsheet as a dashboard in the event that you do not have an existing dashboard or spreadsheet. Now, which then brings me to a question, which would be, how many colleagues currently on the call already have dashboards that they are using in their day-to-day work to measure the impact of their organizational work? If you do have one, once again, if you could please just do a thumbs up just to get a sense. Right, I saw a few hands flash. I'm not sure how many, but I think I saw 5 hands flash on my screen. The reason I ask is that, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say there's quite a few actually that have also just come through while you were speaking now, Pilani. So I want to probably say about 10 or so, if I saw correctly as well.
Okay, great. So just a note before we proceed. So there would be two scenarios in terms of dashboards that are being used by organizations. It can either be an Excel or Google Sheets based dashboard that you may be using. Some more advanced organizations tend to also take those and they convert them to software-based, maybe a CRM kind of dashboard as well. But for this session for today, we're dealing with the Excel worksheet. And the idea for the session is to, take a step back, look at the KPIs, how we define them, how we measure them, and also how we prioritize them. In the sense that do they measure actual impact, or perhaps are they what we call vanity KPIs, which as much as may have them, they may not have impact or impact what you measure in a way that you can change and improve, iteratively as well. So we look at that. And while speaking about the different types of spreadsheets, it's very important also to note sometimes some of the shortcomings that you may get in spreadsheets that are dashboards that you may already have. Typically, what we've seen in the work that we do, because we do assist quite a lot of organizations in putting together kind of dashboard. And in particular, we tend to work with dashboards that maybe are used to report to FRCs. So that is your finance and risk committees within boards of organizations. Typically, the more mature the organizations are, NPOs, the more there's a big pressing need to ensure that all the most important KPIs, and in some instances, beyond just programmatic work, it could be all facets of the organization, that they are monitored and the risks are managed, and performance is also managed in terms of delivery. And what we've seen in the work that we do is that at times you would have people work who put a lot of energy in putting together dashboards, but you find the dashboards are not being used. And the reason that happens is because in some instances you'll have one dashboards that are too cumbersome to use or to read for someone who's not created a dashboard because there's too many tabs. Sometimes you get numbers that are only updated quarterly, so they are not correct and do not reflect the actual work. And in some scenarios, you have data that is collected, but is never turned into decisions because the dashboards do not drive, or should I say, the KPIs do not drive action in terms of what needs to be done. So they're not informative enough to take a KPI being measured to turn it into a decision that needs to be taken by the organization. So these are some of the shortcomings that hopefully after today, we will try and minimize in terms of dashboards, whether using an Excel dashboard or using an automated, maybe software-based dashboard, the same principles still apply. And dashboards that drive action, what they tend to do is they stick to really the important indicators. And by the way, it may say 5 here, it could be 6, it could be 7. The bigger the organization, the bigger the number of key performance indicators, right? But from an impact perspective, you'll find that 3 to 5 tend to capture the essence of what is being done by the organization, and they are, I suppose, important enough to drive action. One of the hardest things about dashboard is the updating rhythm, i.e., how often are those updated on on an annual basis. And typically, the correct rhythm is to ensure that at least monthly, your spreadsheet or your dashboard is updated. And some, depending on how active and busy the organization is, sometimes this could even be weekly as well. And they tend to then have very important statuses that can tell you at a glance whether that particular KPI is things are going well positively, whether there's an issue, and whether everything is failing. And that typically is done through a rag, where you have red, amber, and green to indicate what is working or not working. And these are some of the things that we always have to look at for to say what really makes, in essence, a good dashboard. So, taking a step back, from a programmatic perspective, what is a program performance scorecard, and how does that show up? And this is specifically important for colleagues in this session who perhaps do not currently have any dashboards that they use in the organization, which I would encourage after this session that they really start adopting that practice, because you need to measure your programs to see if there's impact. So essentially what this is, for colleagues who may not be using dashboard, is that a performance scorecard is a single living view of a handful, and the key thing is a handful of numbers that tell you whether your program is on track, and it's built in a way so that anyone can read it in under a minute, or at least in under 5 minutes, let's say. And one of the key things is that a full impact dashboard needs stronger outcome evidence than we can build today. What I mean by that is a fully fledged impact kind of scorecard dashboard. So what we will be doing today, we will limit our session to at least 3 indicators that we will prioritize through our process that we'll go through to say that as an organization, we do X type of work in our organization, and because of that, we need to measure these 3 KPIs. And once we've identified what those KPIs are, you will then, through the session, populate the document that you have with those KPIs. I will explain the process of populating that. Then we will have a good understanding of what are the 3 main important KPIs, which will give us kind of a snapshot of your program. So that is the idea and the outcome that we hope to achieve for today. And also, I spoke about RAG, which is red, amber, and green. Just to explain some colleagues what that implies, it's literally a kind of a color-coded snapshot of your organization, where red means whatever your target for your KPIs was is not being met. So already, if you are reporting to a risk committee, they'll quickly see, okay, something is wrong here. Let's find remediation steps that we can fix it. Green, naturally, is when things are going well. That is, you are either meeting your targets or you're exceeding your targets. And amber typically articulates that you may not be meeting your targets, but there's nothing to really worry about at this point. However, it needs attention to ensure that the numbers improved. So essentially, a performance scoreboard does that. It articulates in very few indicators your programmatic work within your organization. It prioritizes only the key indicators in that, and is then designed in a way that very quickly anyone looking at it can see through a rag of color coding how things are moving to make decisions. And some of the key concepts, what you call the anatomy of a useful KPI, is that, and by the way, we will go through these. I will be moving away from the slides when we do the kind of practical work. But for now, we're just going through some of the core principles so that when we do the exercise, we are quite clear on what we're trying to achieve. Is that the KPI must be that one thing you're measuring that is important and makes a big difference in the programmatic work that you do. One of the key things in a row of KPIs, so when you say a row, that would be a line in an Excel document of different columns that speaks to what you're trying to do. And there will be there a target. A target is what may have been set up in the planning phase of your organization to say, we are going to do maybe training. We will train 100 people. So that becomes a target and a benchmark against which you will measure the success of that program. And then you will have what you call the actual numbers. Now, this would be if you had 100 people targeted to train, how many do they actually train on the day? And based on that, you will then have a status, what I call a red, which will either be red, amber, or green. And what that does is that depending on if you trained 100 people or 30 people or 70 people will show you where you are at a glance using color-coded language, if you will. And most importantly, for each KPI, there has to be an owner. So in this scenario, if we are doing training and are training 100 people, for instance, maybe the program manager will be the person responsible for that, and that's the owner that will then be assigned to that particular KPI. And by the way, you may have multiple KPIs on a dashboard with multiple owners. So not one person owns every KPI in that particular dashboard. And one of the things you also want to have is that once you've outlined your KPI, what that is, i.e., training people, you have a target, you have actual numbers, you have a status, you have the owner, then there must be an action because the whole idea and principle of a dashboard is to give you numbers that help you make good decisions, not just to give you numbers and then no action happens. So if there is no action assigned to each KPI on a dashboard, already that dashboard is a bit slightly deficient and it needs to then have actions that guide that particular KPI. And very importantly as well, there needs to be a review period. So for instance, if we say in the same example of training, we train people and we target 100 people a month and we do this monthly, there then needs to be a review period of that KPI at the end of each reporting month. So typically, how we do it is that when you have a dashboard, because you are reporting monthly and your rhythm to update it is monthly, you will input all the KPIs for that month against your target. You'll see the status and everything else. At the end of the calendar month, you only will then populate in that, say, on the second or third. But generally, by the fifth of the month, we tend to then expect that that dashboard is updated and reviewed to ensure that it is up to date, because then there might be an FRC meeting coming as an example. And if those are not updated on time, it impacts the actual meetings that happen as an example. So very important. So these are really core concepts of the anatomy of a good KPI and useful role, if you will, in a spreadsheet that is deemed to be a dashboard. So now what we'll be doing our first exercise for the day. And I have to say this, and I think I'll say this again in the last session that we've had, is that because these are very much hands-on exercises in this series for 2026. There tends to be quite a bit of time we try to allocate for the doing part and not only just for the presenting and the talking part. So for this session, we'll spend about 10 minutes on this hands-on exercise. And if you could just please excuse me, I'm seeing that my battery is running low. I just want to quickly plug my charger. It's right next to me, if I may. Apologies for that, and thank you. So in this exercise, what we are seeking to do is, I am interested to one, for our colleagues who spent time in prep of the session, they would have, based on the instructions on the PDF we sent, would have looked at the kind of KPIs they measure in their organization, for one. And in doing so, they would have noted what those are. And what we'll be doing now is I would ask all colleagues who have done that exercise to open their spreadsheets. I'll give you a minute just to do that so that we can have that ready. These would be the KPIs that you currently measure as part of your programs within your organization. So we'll give it a minute for you to just open that.
Just a reminder for everybody who may have joined in a bit late, if you have not received these documents, if you've not seen them on your meeting invites, just pop me a direct message and I'll just email them through to you if you need to use them.
And as you do that, by the way, with your open document, have a look at that spreadsheet for the colleagues who have spreadsheets for their day-to-day programs. And I would like you to count your tabs. If your dashboard has got multiple tabs, just have a sense of how many tabs exist there. That would be an interesting exercise. And how many of those tabs, say in the last 3 months, you haven't really worked on that existing spreadsheet. And once you have, do also perhaps just highlight one number that currently answers. So what should we do? I.e., what is that one metric that you're able to look at and say, based on your understanding of that metric, it tells you what to do. And then think about also some of the questions that may come from either your funder or your ED as well, that they most often ask about the outputs from that particular document. And then based on that, I'll be curious from the colleagues in the room and request actually that 1 or 2 or 3 type maybe perhaps one question to the chat that pops up when it's time to report, and perhaps the ED wants data and information, or the funder. What is that one question that typically would ask you to say, based on what you measure, we really, really are interested in this one thing. So if you could open that, that'd be great. While you do that, I'll be moving to our worksheet in the meantime. And I'll stop sharing for now. I will rely on you as I'm just to, as colleagues engage, to just let me know what inputs have come through from our colleagues.
No problem, Lenny. I'm just sending a couple of them the spreadsheet, but as soon as anything pops up, I'll let you know.
Okay, so with that spreadsheet that you might have open, which speaks to the work that you do, I will then ask you to, in the same vein, open this particular document and open this particular tab. What we want to do in this instance is to take those particular KPIs, and we'll take perhaps 3 or 4 that you measure in your document, in your dashboard, and I'd like you to input them here where it says candidate KPIs. I'll explain the process of what we are doing at the moment.
Pilani, there's a note that people are just asking just for you to zoom into the spreadsheet. I think there might
Oh,
be a
okay. Okay, let me just
visibility
make it
issue. Yeah.
slightly bigger. Let me see how I can do that.
And then everybody who's asking me for the spreadsheet, I've sent it through. Please just have a look at your emails for me.
Let me see how I can make this big. Not sure if it's easier to see now. I'll just close the menu to make it a bit more visible.
I think it looks good. Natasha, you'll just let us know if you're still struggling to see it on your side.
Okay. I would though encourage colleagues to also open theirs because they've got the exact same sheet that I have, with the exception that in mine, I have populated this with my examples of KPIs, of which they would do the same thing, look at what they measure at work and populate that particular KPI, i.e., what are you measuring? Is it a number of participants, number of active volunteers? Whatever the scenario is for your particular organization, we'll just populate it here and let me know when you are done. I'll rely on you, Zamo, for timing because this particular session is meant to be 10 minutes. So please just hold me to account with time so that we don't run out of time.
No problem. Let's just give it one more minute for everybody to fill in.
Okay.
Remember, you don't have to do all your KPIs. You can even just do 2 or 3 for now, just for the exercise for you to practice. Then as you continue to use the spreadsheet, then you can obviously be a bit more intentional. But for today, it's just for you to be able to familiarize yourself with the actual tool and then start to see how you can utilize it in your organization. Pilan, I think we can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do for this session is I will walk you through the rationale and the logic behind this particular tab. It's very important to mention that this tab, what you do here, is designed in a way where you can almost audit your KPIs. So when you say audit your KPIs, to say, I have these KPIs that I measure, or I've been measuring for the past maybe couple of years. And perhaps in some scenarios, I'm not always happy with the outcomes, or I'm not happy with how they inform the work that we do, or they inform how we report to our funders. And there's always questions coming back from our funders because there's lack of clarity. That is kind of the idea or the principle. So in my example here, and that might be different in yours, is that in keeping with my training example, I am looking at 4 candidate KPIs that I think are important and I want to prioritize. And the idea here is you want to ensure that you prioritize the KPIs that matter. So in my training example, I then said, one of the KPIs I would want to measure is the number of participants completing a training session, because this is very much an important KPI. And then once I put it here, the next question would be, as I'm auditing this KPI, is this KPI an input into the work that we do, or is it an output? So for example, an input KPI would be we spent X amount of rand to facilitate the training. That's an input KPI. It's not an output KPI. But the number of training sessions is an output KPI. So as such, I've marked mine to be an output KPI in the audit. The next question would be, is this KPI tied to an objective? So as an organization, if a big part of the work that we do is to deliver training to recipients, then absolutely, this KPI would then be linked to or is tied to an objective. And if that's the case, in this process of auditing this, I will mark it as a yes. The next question would be, if I put a KPI, is it measurable? Can I quantify that KPI? Is it assigned to a specific quantum and number that I can measure? If the answer is yes, and in this case, it's a yes because I can quantify that we've trained 50 people, for instance, then it is a yes. And then the next thing would be, was this KPI measured against a benchmark, a target? For instance, in this example, I spoke about targeting 100 people, for instance, to train. And if that's the case, I do have a target for this KPI. And then I will say, again, yes. The next question will be, is this owned by someone, i.e., is someone responsible for this KPI? The answer has to be yes, because based on our initial discussion earlier, is that if there's no owner to a KPI, then that particular role of a KPI is deficient. It is not sufficient to drive action because no one will be responsible for that action or drive that action. So in this case, yes, it is owned by either the trainer or the program manager. Then next question is, if it's all yeses, then does it qualify? I.e., does it qualify to be really a meaningful KPI? Then the answer is yes. Another example, number of active volunteers on the program, right? Now, volunteers do not receive training, so they're not the recipients of the training, but they are rather inputs into the work that we do in the training process. So you mark that as, for example, an input. And then you'll say, in that particular number of volunteers, is it linked to a tie objective? The answer would be yes, because without volunteers, you can't do the training, perhaps as an example. So that's a yes. Is it trackable? Perhaps we knew that we needed to have 10 volunteers to deliver training for 100 people. If indeed it's trackable as a number, then you can say yes. Did it have a defined, clear target? Depending on how the planning was done, this could be a yes or this could be a no. For instance, a yes could be perhaps the defined target was to say these particular volunteers need to be trained for X hours before, maybe in a train the trainer program, before the actual training. If that's the case, then it's a yes. However, if none existed, then this would be, for example, a no. And is someone responsible for this? Is, perhaps say that the main person who trains, the program manager, responsible? If it's a yes, then it is a yes. However, the fact that we have a no here, then this might either deprioritize or even cancel out this particular KPI almost completely. And one more thing to, because we are running out of time, one more thing to speak about is that each of these two have an action. So here, in particular, for the number of participants completing training, if this goes well, then we will follow up with the two lowest attendance sites within a week of that particular training to find out why is not attendance, what could the issues, could it be the quality of the training, and whatever the case might be. So again, this particular KPI is not just a KPI on its own, and it's not a vanity KPI to say, oh, we trained 100 people and that's it. It then follows through with recommendations of what then needs to be done. And that's how a KPI needs to function for a dashboard that is usable. As an example, I will pause here for now, and then I'll come back to the spreadsheet, but I want to then segue back to our presentation. And I think with your permission, Zamor, if anything pops up with our colleagues as we do this, we have another activity we'll do now in the same spreadsheet. But if any question comes up, I would encourage colleagues to maybe just type it in the chat section, and as you go, I will then deal with those. Perhaps it could be seeking clarification or whatever the case might be.
I've actually got a question now from Livu Pilani, who would like to know, is it okay if a KPI has more than one owner? So as an example, in this case, that owner could be the program manager as well as the one who's the trainer or the facilitator.
The answer will be no, because then who will, just from a practicality perspective from day to day, somebody has to be specifically assigned to it, because you may have two people and then one person will think the other person followed through, the other person thinks so. It's a problem. Someone needs to be assigned to it, and that needs to be one person. Yeah.
Got you. So even if it affects both the program manager and the facilitator, they need to decide within the organization whose priority it is the most, so that they can assign it to the correct person to ensure that someone is actually looking after that particular KPI.
Absolutely. In some instances, the program manager may assign this in the document, in the dashboard, to the trainer, because they are maybe on the ground and they can follow up and understand what is going on.
Okay, got you. One question maybe from my side, Pilani, when you were going through the list of yeses and nos on the spreadsheet now, not on the PowerPoint, is it my understanding that if you have at least one no on those questions when you're asking yourself the questions, whether is it measurable, execution, all those things, if you get a no, does that automatically mean something is not a KPI, or does that mean you have to take a closer look at it?
So
and
two things. Sorry,
sure.
Please go ahead.
And I was going to say, and if you say yes and no could mean maybe have a look at it, how many no's is alarming for you to say, okay, this may not really be a KPI? Is it just one no? Is it two no's? How many no's would be something that's alarming for us as people that are looking at those the spreadsheet, the information on the spreadsheet?
It's a great question. So typically for me, if in the audit stage, one KPI has a no, it means I need to pay attention to it. Maybe let me just go back to the spreadsheet. It means I need to pay attention to it because, for instance, this one, the maybe one no because we didn't define a target. So not all is lost. It means you need to go back and have a conversation with whoever is in that team to say, if we want to have volunteers for the program, which in this case is an input KPI, i.e., it's resources spent on the program. How many people would that be? What is our target? Because again, we can't not have a target if we will define this as a KPI. So the answer then is it does not meet the requirements of being a KPI, but it is not something difficult to quickly remedy or fix, because then it takes a conversation and you come back and update that. But what it does is that this audit process tells you that something is wrong with that KPI or something is right. So it is not yet a proper KPI, but that can be remedied very quickly. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So what we've just done now, colleagues, was to the four test KPI filter or audit, where we looked at, is it linked to a particular objective of that program? We also defined, is it trackable, i.e., can we update it reliably? And we've defined the target, i.e., this is what we want to achieve. It's a benchmark. We'll measure against that, and defined who owns that particular KPIs. Now, our next exercise, I'm quite mindful of time today. I got wrapped around the knuckles last time by Zamo for running late, is that for the second exercise, we will then now zoom in with the hope that you have, through the first exercise, marked your particular KPIs for your organization and added them into the audit tab of that particular Excel sheet. Now, what you want to do is, with the examples that you've listed, and my examples as well that are listed in my audit tab for those KPIs, is that now we will narrow down those KPIs to at least 3 or 2. For today, I'd be happy with one, even 1 or 2 that you can narrow down to what matters the most for this session because of time constraints. And I need you to list that metric you currently track on the worksheet. I will show you where you must list it. We've already run through the ones we had through the 4 test filter, so we've already done that. And very importantly, of the ones that we have run through, examples in the previous exercise, you will need to keep at least one that passed all 4 tests, those yeses, right? Even if you had more than 3 qualify, but I think for this session we'll just focus on the one. And I would then be interested to understand, because then you need to write out of that one that meets all the requirements as a KPI, write one sentence in that KPI that if this KPI goes red meaning that you are not meeting your target, because that KPI would have had a target assigned to it. If it goes red, you will then what? I.e., what would be the remedy to ensure that that particular KPI moves from red to at least amber, but ideally it moves to green, because then green implies that you are meeting your targets. So in my scenario, for instance, in my example, if we provided training for 100 people, at least there was a plan, the target, and we had 10 people come for their training, and automatically that would make it red because we've met the target. It's not even close. I would then look at that particular KPI and say to myself, I know something went wrong because people didn't attend. We had 30, let's say we had 10 trainers there, but only 20 people came. We had spent all those on those resources of people who were training and so on, yet the numbers didn't look great. What does that mean? It means something went wrong. And if it goes red, then we will ensure that we send invitations on time. We will ensure that we have sites for training that are accessible from a distance wise from where our recipients reside. Those things, they tell you what you need to fix because it's a KPI. Yes, I didn't meet my targets, but the KPI and colleagues, there's a difference between a vanity KPI because typically sometimes, vanity KPIs will give you a good number that looks great and you feel good about it, but it tells you nothing. And meaningful KPIs, even if it's in the red, from a red perspective, it tells you something that, look, we need to do invitations earlier. We need maybe to choose a different day of the week for the training. Maybe we need to have training mid-month and not month end, where people have less commitments and so on. But the idea is that it tells you something. So now we've done the audit. And in that audit, one of the things that we have, and I've in a way to cut down on time, I've dealt with this area as well as an example of a KPI that we went through. That the KPI is the number of participants completing training. The target is 100 participants, and I then put a scenario to say if 72 participants come to that particular training, based on my target of 100, what does that look like? In my, dashboard, in my, what you call red, amber, green, this would be an amber because, 72% of the target is not terrible, but it's definitely below the threshold of what we would deem as green, as success. However, it is absolutely above red, which then would imply that, we have not met our target. Again, that particular KPI has an owner, which is a program manager, and the action was follow up on 2 sites showing low attendance by Friday. In the case that we are not meeting our target, and also the review day, which is next Monday's team meeting. We must check in and review what has happened, what went well, what didn't go well as well. And I think also at this point it's important to mention that beyond just being a document or an artifact that you have and you track your programs, a KPI also facilitates meetings very well because it gives a very focused issue that can be tracked and discussed because it's measurable. There was planning ahead to say we had X targets. It also does very well in facilitating meaningful meetings where people can come with ideas to resolve an issue based on that particular metric that was measured in that dashboard. So it's very important not only to measure the work, but after the fact, when you're now reviewing and looking how can you improve some of this work. And to get this right, from a logic perspective, is that the most common mistake sometimes colleagues do is to assume, and again, speaking about vanity metrics, is to assume that the higher the number is always a better thing. But that is not always the case because sometimes you may have a budget of, say, 20,000 for whatever program you might have. And then you do your KPI and you find that you've spent 40,000, which is a high number. But that's not necessarily a good thing because it's higher, but it means you're a bigger expense. So it's always important when defining metrics to always be aware of that. When you're doing that audit to see if this metric makes sense, to ensure that you don't make the mistake of thinking everything must be high. I was just putting this here because it's quite an important consideration. And also very important to have a particular target that you have. So for instance, if it's a financial consideration and the target is 20,000 and you spend 15,000, you're probably doing very well and you're absolutely in the green from a red perspective as you go through. Now, what we'll be doing, colleagues, is I would like us to take those examples that colleagues worked on in the spreadsheet. We will now move to a different tab on the document. Let me quickly, apologies, I shouldn't have stopped sharing. I actually should have just moved around. Now, this is the actual scorecard of the document. This is where now you get to, have the actual impact scorecard. So this worksheet we have worked on here was the audit worksheet where you validate to say, does this make sense as a KPI? I had also prepped for the purposes of this of this session, just some ideas I put together around what it would look like for a training program. And I'd worked on an example like this one, which was to say if you were targeted 100 people, 72 people come, what is the percentage, what is our threshold for green, amber, what does that look like, and so on, and who's responsible. But for now, what we'll be doing now is then we will extract from this session here, just one, even if it's just one KPI, so that we can work in it in the real world. So in my scenario, as an example, I extracted the first one, which was number of participants, because why? It met the criteria. It's an output KPI. It's after the fact you can measure. It is linked to an objective, which is our training programs and success of those programs. It is trackable because it's a number. There's a quantum attached to it. It is defined as well because there is a clear target. We want to train 100 people and the program manager owns it, so it qualifies. So now I take that particular KPI. I then move it to my scorecard, which is here. And it is number of participants completing training. And in this case, the higher the number, the better, because we are trying to meet 100 people, but if 150 come, even more, even better. So the higher the number, the better. But if this was a financial KPI and it was an input, money spent to deliver the program, the higher the number wouldn't suffice. It would need to be, in that example, the lower the better. And in this case, we had 100, which was our target. However, 72 people came. So I took these numbers because already they were in my worksheet, in my example, and they qualified. And I put them in here. Let me just close maybe this, make it bigger. I put them in here. And this is a formula. It calculates percentages automatically that out of this, how many people in percentage-wise came. And by the way, these two, perhaps to explain further, is that anything that is 80% or more here, and this is based on targeting, you determine what you feel is your target. 80% or more will be green, will be seen as a success. However, anything 50% or less will then be red and a failure. So because in this case, we achieved 70%, and you can see here there is a actual formula. It then tells me that this is amber, i.e. we didn't meet our threshold, but there's nothing really to panic about, but we need to keep an eye on this training to ensure that we can improve it to 80% and above, which is success, which is green. And again, there is a program manager who is the owner. And the action here is that follow up with the two lowest attendance sites within the week. And that follow up for me would be to understand, is it a case? Because if I am the program manager, I may not deliver the training. And consequently, I may not be there during the training all the time. And perhaps a site visit to just see what's going on might be worthwhile, because there might be a plethora of different things that might be happening there, making people not attend. Perhaps the venue is not great. Perhaps the distance of the venue from where the core base of my recipients reside, it's too far. So it tells me what action to do. So colleagues, in the same vein, I would ask you to choose at least one metric for this exercise and then input this in this scorecard. Please do not add anything under the percentage here because this is a formula. And the amber will auto-calculate as well because it's a formula. So you'll only add your information within the yellow here. If by any chance you also are clear on what targets you had set yourself in the past, you're welcome to add them here. However, the other columns, please do not change the formula. You can fill them in, and perhaps what we could do, depending on time, I see we are at just after 11 o'clock, sorry, 12 o'clock, is that we could have perhaps some brave colleagues in the session who can maybe walk us through, obviously it's an example, one of the examples, and what those look like. So we'll give you time to just input here.
Pilani, there's a question here from the guys at Magna Theatre. They'd like to put in a number under the target column, but it seems it's only allowing them to add a percentage. The metric is participant absence in the number of absentees. So that's what they're trying to do. But it seems like it's only giving them a percentage. I'm not sure if it's doing the same thing on your side.
Yes, so this should be a percentage, and I'll explain why it's ideally a percentage. Because remember, your target, we spoke about a target being quantifiable, is that it must be a number you can measure. So you want to, meet 100, which is a target. And also based on that target, you can tell, okay, X amount came. And this particular column is already calculated with a formula, so you won't change it. However, if you're working at a threshold and you want them to have the amber, red or green, auto-calculate for you as well, is that you must have a percentage for your threshold to say, if you meet 50%, we are failing. If you meet 80%, we are not. Because if you have actual numbers, maybe your number was 10,000 X or whatever the case might be, but you need a percentage to measure that in a meaningful way. So it has to be a percentage, I would advise.
So in this case, because they're trying to measure for the number of absentees, so I'm assuming they're running sessions and then they want to see how many participants are not arriving, so almost like an attrition rate. What would then be the correct target to put in? Because I don't necessarily think they have a target for how many people they'd like to be absent, but I don't know, maybe you can advise a bit more with this particular case.
Okay, I think what we could do, so that the answer is meaningful, is that perhaps we need to start here and start an example. And what is the metric that is being measured?
The metric is the absence in numbers of absentees. So I don't know if the guys at Magnet Theatre, because I'm not sure who's joining us, can maybe just jump in. I just assumed from the sentence they meant the absence in numbers of the people that are participants within their program, but I'm not sure if I'm articulating this clearly. I'm just reading it as it's written here.
Can the colleague maybe come online and just walk us through? So let's see that, maybe use that as an example, as an exercise.
Hi there, it's Jenny. Jenny speaking from Magna Theatre. So
Hi, Jenny.
we're just aiming, so we're working in numbers of students, as in 20 or 40 or 30. Does it have to be a percentage? And can we not use a number?
Okay, so Jenny, just to ask, the KPI you want to measure, maybe there's a question, what is the purpose of the KPI?
I suppose it's more just for us tracking so we can pull up a report at the end of a month. It's not necessarily a dashboard for a funder, but more for our internal processes. So, for example, we send our trainees to theatre visits, and these are on the weekends, and we have a certain level of absenteeism because it's not in the sort of Monday to Friday week. So for us, it would just be helpful to look over a quarter, have these increased or decreased, or do we need to, have a conversation with certain repeat offenders?
May I ask, would it not, and again, I'm just exploring here, would it not be, you'll tell me if you said no, but would it not be useful to do the inverse to calculate how many people actually attend?
Yes, we could do that, but then are we still needing to input that as a percentage rather than as just an actual count? As in 5 people or 20 people? Does it need to be a 80% or 90%?
Right. So perhaps an example, sorry, I do not go out here, so see if you can solve your problem. So let's say number of, are there students, you would say?
Yes, students.
I'll just call it a session, right? So, and ideally, the higher the number, the better of attendance, right? So the higher is better. And typically, what's your target? Because your target will depend on your planning. So in your scenario, if you already have 100 students, let's say 40 students, right? And they are part of that program, the target is then all of them must attend, right? That would be
Probably
the target.
unrealistic, but that would be a good target, yes.
Yeah, no, the target is not always realistic, but it's what your ideal number, because again, it's a program and there might be resources going to it. So your benchmark is 100, but you won't always achieve. But you then, again, the idea of a KPI, it tells you what to do. It's quite aspirational, but it tells you what to do and what action to take if things don't go well. So let's say 40. Right? And then let's say maybe 13 attended.
Sorry,
Right.
my question is, there seems to be a formula though in my spreadsheet, because when I try and input 40, the 40 comes up as 40%. That was my question.
In the same scorecard I'm working on.
Yes, exactly that one. In the target column, when I try and input 40 as a number, it comes up as 40 as a percentage.
No, it shouldn't. And you and I should be working on the same scorecard. Can maybe another colleague just input some data then tell me if it's a percentage?
So I've checked mine and it's working fine, Pilani, but I haven't inputted anything. I don't know if anyone else is maybe able to just check for us, because I think maybe Anna Marie's question then is also similar, because he was asking if her KPI is measured in percentages, example 80% of beneficiaries attending, can she just enter 80 in the target? So yes, Anna Marie, I think you can go ahead and put in 80. But is everybody else getting a number, or is anyone else receiving the same issue as Jenny received, where you put in an? So seemingly, yeah, Anna Marie says hers is fine. So it might just be an issue with the one that the guys at Magnet have got. So maybe they can just delete the formula in the middle. I don't even know if it is a formula. I don't know what's causing it.
Yeah, I've just changed the formula to a number, so it seems to be working now. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm not too sure what happened there, Jenny.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Hopefully we've answered the question. I hope to an extent, Jenny.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, pleasure.
And then
So
we only had one other question, Pilani, which was from Anna Marie, but I'm going to assume that what you've answered for Jenny's kind of answered hers, because she was saying that if her KPI measured is in percentages, 80% of beneficiaries attending the training, can she just put in the number 80? And I see a thumbs up, so I think she has been answered by that particular question. So
Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, so essentially, colleagues, I suppose the principle of it all is that with the impact scorecard, it enables you, well, firstly, to determine if it's the right KPI to measure by auditing it. And once you have, you then start moving and migrating those that pass the audit to then their scorecard. So this spreadsheet has been built in a way that it kind of, there's instructions, it kind of walks you through the process. But the key tabs are really the KPI worksheet for the audit and the scorecard in terms of the inputs and seeing whether, has this met the percentage? Sorry, has this met the benchmark of what was the target? Target is 80%. However, if we meet 33%, we are way below the threshold of red. It then becomes red. And this then by implication, and when I spoke earlier about the red, amber, green, is that if you're reporting somewhere, people can quickly within a minute see all the metrics that you're measuring and if they're doing well or not. And then what that does in a meeting setting, especially for maybe high-level meetings where you've got an FRC meeting, which is typically ExCo, as well as some board members, and there's multiple reporting streams in one day, they can quickly view the dashboard and say, okay, green, 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 no need to worry. They can then zoom in for the meeting on perhaps the red and maybe based on time they have on the amber. And the idea of a dashboard is, yes, it tells a story, it measures your metric, but also it tells you what to do. And also from a management perspective, you're able to quickly see what to focus on so that you can have remedial steps for that particular issue. And that is pretty much some of the benefits of having a dashboard that you are working on. So we, colleagues, have now moved, and I think I'm trying to leave time for any questions at the end. We have gone through this. However, what we haven't had, we've had questions, but we haven't had any colleagues maybe wanted to just quickly walk us through the KPI that they have put in. If there's a colleague, I would really appreciate it to quickly go through one with your guidance, just a minute with your guidance, Zamo. If not, we'll then move on. Because part of that particular process was to do two things, was to pick one row of a particular KPI like I showed you in this session, and then what's the status cell change and update, which you just did now in the exercise. And the idea then is then to say, as the value increases and threshold improves, the changing of colors, we've seen that of the red from amber to green to red as well. So in a sense, we've gone through some of these processes. There's some colleagues who have their mics on. If you could please turn it off. Unless you want to maybe speak and contribute, then it's fine. And the other part, and again, I emphasize this and I spoke on this, is that you need at the end that KPI to inform you what action you must take, right? So, for instance, and I'll go back to Jenny's example with the students that go out to theaters, right? Maybe she has 40 students, and she would prefer that 80% of them make it for those sessions where they do visits. And then if Jenny finds that out of the 40 students, maybe like in that example, 13 make it, which is 33% of her 80% target, then it might say a few things in terms of what to do next, because clearly it's in red, clearly the target is not being met. But the key thing about KPI is to inform a business decision to say, okay, are the students struggling because you can see they're not making it to the sessions? Are they struggling with making these sessions? If they are, what could it be? Should we run a quick survey to understand what the problem is? Or does someone else know what the problem is? But then what it does, it creates a focused view to say, how do we resolve this? Because again, we have the numbers, we have the KPIs. We then take the action and then have, review dates of what needs to be done, meetings for resolution, and so on. I will not focus too much on this, but maybe just to focus on pitfalls because of time, is that as you work on your dashboard, it's very important not to have a metric overload where you have multiple indicators, more than 10, that you may not really use, that don't tell you anything, because it's also counterproductive. You spend so much time trying to put this together, but the data says nothing to you. Again, vanity metrics, for example, likes and attendees, feel good, but really change the decision sometimes. So whenever you put that KPI, you must ask yourself, so what? What does this mean for our programs, for our organization, and for the success of those programs? Again, not having a named owner is a red flag and an issue always, because the whole idea of measuring a performance indicator is that it must tell you what action to take, but somebody must take that action. Who is responsible? So there needs to be a named owner. Some of the things, and we see this all the time, is that people would put together a dashboard and forget about it. And it never sees the light of day, and it's never used in any meetings after that to inform any decisions. And also very important, when you speak about reds, red, amber, and green, right? You need to understand what is the threshold. What is your, is 80% your threshold? For green is 50% the threshold. For red, you need to determine that when you put together that particular dashboard. And please do avoid unclear definitions of KPIs. The simpler in how it's named and naming convention, the better, because then everybody can understand what they're looking at when they're looking at the dashboard. And also, colleagues, we've spoken about this in other sessions around data and data privacy. There always needs to be consideration of sensitive data being put in dashboard, particularly who views it and so on. And always be mindful around data privacy. It is a law for us in this country now, and also there are consequences, and we've seen those consequences in real life in the last few months. So again, always important to ensure that whatever you do, there's always a consideration for data privacy as well. We've touched on this in other sessions, but just something to keep thinking about. And also an encouragement for colleagues who already have dashboards, and for those colleagues for today's sessions who intend on adopting a particular scorecard or dashboard, is that very important to keep the rhythm going, updating that dashboard. If it's something you do weekly, you might need to take a cadence or a rhythm of updating it on a weekly basis. But also there needs to be a review of those documents or those dashboards at least monthly, where you can look at the scorecard and review and so on. And there needs to also be strategic sessions that plan, again, these KPIs. What are we measuring? What are our targets? How does it, link back to the programmatic work we do? In this spreadsheet I've shared, there is now a way where you can audit in the strategic session those KPIs to say, are they meaningful? So that in the future, you can actually use them. And I think, colleagues, for now, we are running out of time, and I'm finding and this is to use Zamo as well, that time seems to fly with your more practical sessions that when you move from spreadsheet to slides. But I think for now we'll pause here to give time for any questions that might arise. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pilani. I think some of the things you put in at the end were actually some of my questions. I know that some people may have questions themselves, so please use this as your chance to be able to ask those questions. Any clarity on this particular session? Is there anything that you are unclear on or not sure on? And as Pilani did explain, the actual spreadsheets, like the Excel file, will actually assist you because it's got the step-by-step on it there. So you'll be able to look at that as well. But otherwise,
right.
Okay, there's someone who is not muted. Sorry, I thought there was someone asking a question. If anyone has a question, this is your time to feel free to go ahead and ask that question. I think on my side, Pilani, is I only had one question. I had a few questions, but you've answered some of them. But I wanted to check is how long of a KPI being in the red, so to say, but it's something that's important for you guys. Should you then start to worry about the things that you're inputting, so the measures that you're inputting to try and help fix it, and if it's not being fixed, how long should you keep it as a KPI, number one? And when then should you change it? Like, is it after you've tried as maybe 4 or 5 iterations of that same KPI? Or is it because it's important for us, we need to make this particular KPI work in this way? Or what would you recommend?
Yeah. So to answer the question, I'll put it this way, Zamal, that the underlying assumption is that the KPI would have been perhaps determined in maybe a strategy session, discussion session, to say we need to, measure this KPI because it's meaningful for our organization. And then ideally, now that the spreadsheet are put together, we can go in there to then stress test almost that KPI to say, is it yes for everything? The owner, everything else. Once you've done that, by the time it's in practice and it's being measured, if you report on a monthly basis, and let's say the first month it's in the red, because an action at the end assigned to it by an owner, that owner would need to then, if it's red, then say, okay, I'm aware it's red in a meeting, in a context, say in a meeting, whether it's in a X-core, whether the case might be, this is red, okay, however, because it's red, we are going to do these actions X, Y, and Z to understand the problem better, almost a diagnostic of it. But in terms of do you keep it or not, if it's a meaningful KPI, you have to keep it. It comes back to what I was saying around vanity KPIs give you good looking numbers all the time, but they've got no material impact in the performance of organization or a program. Those you need to throw away. And those ones also will not pass the audit that we went through. So they may always look great. Metrics looking great is not the objective. However, the whole objective of a dashboard is to say, how do we make decisions that drive the organization forward, that drive the program forward? So if it's read consistently on month one, there needs to be so typically what we do a lot of dashboards for FRCs. And typically some of the dashboards don't cover just programs. They will cover different parts. They will cover programs. They will cover IT in an organization and multiple other particular KPIs. And in that instance, whichever KPIs is flagged as red, there will then be, after FRC meeting, a recommendation to say what will the remedial action be in that month, i.e., how will we fix the problem in that month? And then we'll come and meet next month and say, did it fix the problem? Did it improve? If not, how can we improve it? Because again, all the KPIs need to be there because they need to be measured and are important for the organization. So it's not about keeping them, it's about improving them. And sometimes just because it looks bad, it's not a bad thing, because you then know what you need to fix for your organization to perform better.
Fantastic. Any other questions? I see in the chat people have asked me to share the previous slides. If you can just click on those links, it'll immediately download the documents straight to you. Sorry, we just can't give access to our SharePoint where most of these sit, so I am just creating some links for you guys to be able to use. And then if there are no other questions, Pilani, a big thank you as usual from our side to you. I think as usual, this has been a very insightful session. I think I've also learned a lot. I think as you were going through it, I was also like, oh gosh, I wonder if I'm doing the right things with my KPIs, you know? So I think it's always such a wonderful time to have you in the space. I also think you offer such great wealth of wisdom from both the corporate side and the NGO side, and you kind of bring that together. So we really do appreciate your insights always. It's always so informative. We've always learned so much from you. So we really just want to say a big, big thank you to you. And we appreciate all the work that you do. And a big thank you to you guys for joining us today. I hope you found this session to be informative. I see some of the thank yous coming up through already in the chat. Looking forward to having you at our next sessions as well. Please remember to also go have a look at our videos. If you've seen on the meeting invites, I've sent a link as well to go look at the videos of the past sessions for those of you guys who are new and have just started to join these sessions. Otherwise, looking forward to having you guys again and wishing you guys all the best with the rest of this month and the rest of this week. Cheers, everybody.